I keep coming back to this study from Dalbar. It is an American research firm. And over the decades, it has studied equity mutual funds in great detail. A striking pattern for me to observe was that an average equity mutual fund in the US has delivered 10% consistently over a long period of time. In contrast, however, investors have earned just under 4%. It did strike me. Same funds, but very different outcomes. It cannot be attributed to bad funds, but it was mainly because of bad behavior. It's because people bought some funds when times were exciting, sold it off when things got a little scary, and repeated this till they ran out of time. India has a very own version of this, and that's exactly what we are going to talk about in this conversation today. Welcome to Money Without Myths. My guest today has had a front row seat to exactly this story. He has watched Indian investors navigate 2008, 2013, 2020, and the euphoria that followed. He's closely watched what it takes for people to stay the course and how people can get deterred when things get a little shaky. Kalpen Parekh is the CEO of DSP Investment Managers, one of the most respected fund houses in India today. He's been extremely candid about what role investor psychology, fund selection plays in long-term wealth management, and that is what we'll delve into today. Hi Kalpen sir, it's great to have you with us. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you, Deshna, for having me on your show.
Before we get into the myths and the drill, I'd love to understand about you, what rather motivates you to continue in being in this field for so many decades now.
Yeah, I'm very clear that I've been very fortunate and lucky. 99.9% people on earth would want to be in roles like mine or in a position like mine, to be in a great company, in a company which is an iconic company, in a role which is the senior most role in the company, in a role which can have impact on hundreds and thousands of careers, and in a role which can have impact on millions of people's lives and financial futures. So to not be motivated would be a crime. And I think these are things that drive me. At the same time, this is a great industry where every day I learn and my company pays me money to learn. In school and college, we would pay money to go to learn.
Yeah.
यहाँ उल्टा है कि आप सीखते भी हो हर दिन and you get paid. And the nature of the work is such where whatever money we save for ourselves and invest, that money also grows at a healthy rate of return. Thankfully, being in the investment industry for 30 years, the principles of investing, etc., you learn faster than most other people. And that helps you in compounding your money at a better rate with reasonable risk management, which most people learn either too late or never learn. So there are so many advantages of the seat that I am in, and I take it with a lot of gratitude, humility, and responsibility.
Fair. It's a very interesting take on that, and I'd love to, it's something that I resonate with a lot too. So yeah. Because you've been in this industry for so long, right? I don't want to have surface level conversations. I'm going to be very candid with you. This is one conversation I'm pretty confident that I can be,
Sure.
just blunt.
Be yourself. Be yourself. Yeah.
So I'd want to understand, you've observed investors for so long. What do you think is that behavioral thing that makes an investor successful versus someone who doesn't make the most of it, right? Is it, let's not just talk about bad timing the market. This I've covered a lot of times. What do you think is the core belief or one thing that really differentiates the two?
Whatever genetic code in our DNA made us survive the vicissitudes of thousands of years, which was flight when there is fear, run away when there is fear. When thousands of years back, when our ancestors would go to cut wood in the jungle and then something would move, they would not sit rationally to decide whether it is a breeze or wind or is it a man-eating animal. They would first run, and they ran, and that's why the species has survived. And you and I are talking. Had they been rational to think and analyze, and if there would have been an animal behind, they would have got eaten up, and we would have been out of the gene pool. So the instincts which made us survive in life is what makes us poor investors in markets. Because markets need anti-instincts, or probably investing, because it is cyclical, because it is a variable field. It's a field of uncertainty and probability. But the techniques that we apply on a day-to-day basis for our life survival, some of these techniques do not work in investing.
Right.
And these things are highly unknown. Most of the time we go through the whole lifespan or our investing spans without knowing about these dimensions or nuances. And this is also a field where we have delusion of overconfidence. We think we know what works. Anyways, the world is unknowable. Carl Sagan has said in his book, The Pale Blue Dot, that in this such a vast universe, we are a small dot, and on that small dot, we as a human race are so tiny. And there's so much yet to be found, yet to be known. But in markets, we come with the knowledge saying that we know everything. So overconfidence and our genetic code, these are the two reasons why we tend to take poor investing decisions. Lack of knowledge, but the belief that we don't lack knowledge is our biggest enemy.
Very interesting that you put it that way, but yeah, I think I've overheard this. Overconfidence is something that is bad, not just investing, every aspect of life. I've received a lot of training about that from my mother. So, all right, thanks for sharing that. And what I'm thinking is, I'll state a few terms. I'd want to just make sure that we are all fundamentally aligned. आपकी और मेरी और बाकी सब जो सुन रहे हैं उन सबकी समझ उस टर्म के बारे में वो ही रहे, है ना? तो थोड़े जो कॉमन टर्म्स है उसकी वहाँ से चालू करते हैं, बिकॉज अपन म्यूचुअल फंड्स की ज्यादा बात कर रहे हैं तो उसी डायरेक्शन में रहेंगे वो टर्म्स, है ना? Okay. I'd want you to explain it to some as though it's some 30-year-old who is not pro finance पढ़ाई, है ना? ठीक है? So, all right. The first term that I have in mind is NAV. What does it mean? Why do most people think of it like stock prices? Ki, na? Cheaper NAV means it's a more valuable investment and vice versa.
See, NAV is not stock price, which is why it's NAV. It's net asset value.
Yeah.
हमारा जो भी पोर्टफोलियो है, कोई भी फंड का, कोई भी स्कीम का, किसी भी एसेट क्लास का, उसकी वैल्यू क्या है आज अगर हम उसे मार्केट में बेचने जाए, उसको बोलते हैं नेट एसेट वैल्यू. तो वेदर वो इक्विटी फंड हो या हाइब्रिड फंड हो या डेट फंड हो या गोल्ड फंड हो, every portfolio has a certain value. If I were to liquidate the whole portfolio today, so let's say today we run 20,000 crores in our mid cap fund, and I don't remember my NAV because I don't track my NAVs. उसकी अगर मान लो NAV 200 रुपया है, तो आज अगर हमने पूरा पोर्टफोलियो बेच दिया तो 20,000 करोड़ का, and we divided by the number of units which are there across 10 lakh unit holders. So whatever money that will come per unit holder is the net asset value.
Right. So, got it. All right, I'll move on to the next term.
Sure.
It is expense ratio.
Okay.
0.5 to 1.5% is what we generally see. And most people tend to ignore it, that it doesn't really have an impact, right?
Yeah.
I'd want to quantify what this impact could look like. If, for example, someone's investing 10 lakh rupees for a period of 15 years, if we if we are able to quantify that, I think that'll help understand.
I have to use a calculator because my mind can't work at that speed. If you don't mind, let me search for a calculator on my website, and then that would help us. So basically, expense ratios do matter, but they are not the only variable which matter. जितना ज्यादा खर्चा है उतना अपना रिटर्न कम होगा.
Right.
अगर मान लो फंड का रिटर्न 12% है और एक्सपेंस रेशियो 1% है, तो द नेट रिटर्न दैट यू विल अर्न विल बी 11%. और अगर एक्सपेंस रेशियो 2% है, तो द सेम फंड विल गिव यू 10% रिटर्न. This is a simplistic way of thinking about expense ratio. But having said that, ये जरूरी नहीं है कि a fund with 1% expense ratio is a better fund versus a fund with 2% expense ratio. It may so happen that you are in a very bad fund with 1% expense, or you are investing at the wrong time versus a 2% fund.
Right.
So that's the second dimension, that the choice of funds becomes very important, and there are many other variables, which is the way the fund is managed, the strategy of the fund, the ideology of the fund, or the cycle at which you're investing in that asset class. Having said that, expense ratio is important, and 1% difference over a 20-30 year period can run into 50 lakhs to a crore.
Right.
तो जितना आप कैपिटल इन्वेस्ट करते हो उस कैपिटल का आधा वैल्यू 1% एक्सपेंस रेशियो खा सकता है if you are a 30-year-old investor. So that's, I think, the impact of expense ratio. It's a very important dimension, but not the only dimension. जरूरी नहीं कि जो सस्ता है वो अच्छा है.
Correct.
लेकिन all is being equal, अगर expense ratio कम है तो then it's a better call to take.
Right. Fair. Okay, the next topic I want to talk about is rolling returns.
Yeah.
Most fund brochures show point-to-point returns, right? What's the difference between rolling and point-to-point? And what should I actually be comparing? When I'm choosing a fund, for example, what should I be looking at?
Yeah, actually, both are in a way not necessarily the best ways, because if I tell you that there are two funds which have given 15% median rolling return on a 5-year basis, they still are not comparable, because their paths to achieve 15% could be very different. So, for example, a fund would have given 18% in the first 3 years, 2.5 years, and 12% in the next 2.5 years to average out to 15. Another fund could have been the opposite and still given 15. But when you just look at rolling return or a point-to-point return, all these numbers just give you one reference point. But like in everything in life, it's a multi-dimensional field. Between point-to-point return and rolling return is a better way to think about investing. So just to give an example, सिल्वर फंड का 3 साल का रिटर्न 250% होगा सिल्वर ETF का. लेकिन अगर इसकी 30-40 साल की हिस्ट्री अगर हम देखें, तो इसका जो मीडियन रिटर्न है, and let's assume we have invested on an average for a 10-year period.
Right.
So the median rolling return for silver or gold as an asset class, as precious metals, would be somewhere closer to 10%.
Right.
Versus the current 1 year, 2 year, 3 year return, which is 100 to 300%. Now, if I want to lure you and mis-sell to you to make you invest in my silver fund, I will say ये fund का 1 साल का return 150% आया है, तो आप डाल दो इसमें पैसा. You will get lured by 150. You will, in your mind, anchor future return expectations to 150. Versus that, if I were to say that there are periods it gives 150, there are periods it gives minus 70 also. Like last 2 months after the recent peak and the current crash, it is down 40%.
Right.
So the better way is to say that ये उतार चढ़ाव के बाद अगर आपने कभी भी 10 साल के लिए पैसा रखा होता, तो इसका वर्स्ट केस रिटर्न 8% आया है, बेस्ट केस रिटर्न 11 आया है, तो आप 8 से 11 के रेंज में एक्सपेक्ट कर सकते हो. On an average, for most investors who have stayed invested for 10 years, it would have given 9% return. So that's a better proxy to say what should be the expected return of an asset class. But it needs two conditions. It needs a very long history. And the second condition it needs is that the future should mimic the past.
Right.
Many times the next 30 years may not reflect the last 30 years for certain asset classes. And it is very difficult to say in advance. So in spite of the fact that history guides us to a certain potential return of an asset class, the future of that could be different than the past.
Right.
With this awareness, we should think about investing. That we can make broad assumptions कि long term में equity ने 12% दिया है तो हमें 12 मिलेगा. और ये possible है शायद 12 ना मिले, ये possible है शायद 15 मिले, and ये भी possible है शायद 10 मिले. And what I want to highlight again, since it is on the topic of returns, is that this is a domain of uncertainty. There is nothing which is certain. There are broad assumptions we can make based on knowledge of past. There are broad expectations of returns we can make, and then little bit pray for luck to be in our favor.
Right. I think one of the points that I want to talk about is that too. But all right. I'll moving on to the next term, alpha and benchmark.
Yeah.
A fund gives me 14%, and Nifty gives 18% in the same period. Have I done well? Or what should I actually be comparing to evaluate a fund's performance?
Just repeat that again, if you don't mind.
So if a fund gives me 14% returns and Nifty during the same period has given me 18%, okay?
18, okay.
Has that fund fund done well, how am I
Yeah.
supposed to evaluate it? Is this the right way to compare?
So again, जैसे आपके हर सवाल में एक एक वेरिएबल है, ये सिंगल वेरिएबल की वजह से आई कांट टेल यू कि ये फंड अच्छा है बुरा है. सो नो डाउट फंड ने अच्छा किया है, बेंचमार्क ने 14 किया है, बट ये क्या ये फंड का बेंचमार्क निफ्टी था तो, और उसने अगर उसी बेंचमार्क को बीट किया तो अच्छी बात है. बट अगर बहुत सारे इन्वेस्टर क्या करते हैं, या उनको लोग ये बताते हैं कि देखो निफ्टी का 14% रिटर्न है और इस फंड ने 18% दिया है, बट वो दैट फंड हैपेंड टू बी अ स्मॉल कैप फंड which has completely different risk profile and segment. So if it is a like-to-like relevant benchmark, and if the fund has done better than the benchmark after expenses, then it is definitely a good return. But just 1 year return alone is not enough. If you then look at 10-year history, if the fund has a 10-year history, and over a 10-year period, let's say the fund would have 4 years earned lesser than the benchmark, 3 years earned same as the benchmark, and the other 3 years earned higher than the benchmark, then I will see that over a 10-year period, what is its return over the benchmark. And if that is a good number, then I know that, okay, the persistency of alpha is better.
Right.
And then you also have to be aware कि क्या ये 10 साल same style से चला था. Because many times styles change. If fund managers change, the styles also change.
Right.
And if styles were to change, then what happened in the last 10 years or the history of last 10 years actually becomes irrelevant. Because the style has changed. So the first thing, last year अगर return अच्छा है benchmark से तो अच्छी बात है. But alpha also is a mean reverting variable. So there are funds where in 1 year they have an alpha, the next year they don't have an alpha. So alpha is mean reverting. What you have to choose basis is the fund's design built on sound principles. Is the fund suitable for me in the first place?
Right.
What could be the volatility of that fund? So for example, there are funds where with the same statistic, if I look at this fund in the year 2008, if Nifty was down 48% and the fund had fallen 60%, then for me, it could be a bad fund. Because generally, what history has shown is funds which fall lesser in sharp falls do tend to rise higher in rises. But over a long period of time, falling less is a bigger virtue for compounding. So there are other dimensions to look at, and not just 1 year of alpha. By the way, to the question of cost, I just give you the data that अगर आपने 10 लाख रुपया इन्वेस्ट किया हो 25 साल के लिए 12% पे, तो 25 साल के बाद 10 लाख की वैल्यू होगी 1.7 crores. और यही अगर आप 11% पे इन्वेस्ट करोगे तो वो हो जाएगी 1.36. So there is an impact of roughly 34 lakhs.
Right.
So 1.7 के ऊपर 34 lakhs का impact है. So a 1% cost impact is effectively roughly around 20% of your corpus value, final corpus value. In fact, 10 लाख आपने इन्वेस्ट किया है, आपके फाइनल कॉर्पस वैल्यू से 30 लाख कम हो गया. 10 लाख के कैपिटल पे फाइनल रिटर्न में से 30 लाख कम हो गया. Is one sensationalizing way of conveying it. I don't want to sensationalize it. I just want to highlight that, of course, costs do matter, but that's not the only variable.
Got it. This is interesting to know that you've calculated it, and it's a pretty huge number, like we'd already preempted. All right, I think we've set the ground with the fundamentals. Why don't we move on to the myths? What I'll do is I'll state the myth, I'll give you a little context, what I'm thinking, and then we can discuss it in greater detail, yeah?
Sure.
Okay, right. So this is one fundamental myth that I've seen a lot. So the myth is that I'll start investing when the market corrects. There's someone or the other who's always, waiting for the right time to enter the market, or, they think they can preempt when it's going to fall and get into it the right time, right? And unfortunately, it doesn't really work that way, and is my observation. But you have watched so many market cycles, right? What has actually happened to people who waited for the right entry point? Do you have any broad observations about patterns?
जिनको ये सब पता होता है उनको मेरा ये वीडियो देखने की जरूरत नहीं है, तो उनको ये सब पता है. So what are they going to learn? I always tell people that अगर आपको ये सब पता है तो why do you want to ask questions which are so basic? And मुझे लगता है 2016 से आज तक generally Indian markets महंगे हैं. They are away from fair value. They are a bit ahead of their fair value. And ideally, theoretically, market should have corrected. but they never corrected when I felt so. They
Okay.
did correct eventually. They corrected. So, for example, market 15,000 पे था. मुझे लगा आज करेक्ट होना चाहिए, बट वो 18,000 पे पहुंचा और फिर 20% गिरा. तो 18 पे पहुंच के 15 पे आया, तो उधर के उधर आया. कभी कभी 18 पे पहुंच के 17,000 तक आया, सिर्फ 1000 पॉइंट गिरा. तो करेक्शन हुआ, आई एम राइट, इट करेक्टेड, बट इट इज स्टिल हायर देन माय एंट्री पॉइंट ऑफ 15,000. So at large corrections, usual corrections are difficult to forecast. Typically हर साल 15 से 20% मार्केट नीचे ऊपर होता है every year. And there are once in 4-5 years it falls by sharply 20 to 30%, and once in 7-8 years it falls by 50%. It just does not come and whisper in our ears कि इस साल मैं कितना गिरने वाला हूँ, या इस साल में मैं कौन से महीने से गिरने वाला हूँ. और वो गिरने के बाद जब वो गिर रहा है, फॉर एग्जाम्पल लेट्स से मार्केट्स आर डाउन, forget the last 3-4 days of up move again, but let's say they fell around 20%, 18%, 15% in the last 6-8 months. At 5% fall, will it turn? Will it fall to 10 and then turn? Will it go down 15% and then turn? Will it fall 20 and then turn? These are unknown variables. So the path of the market is almost impossible to predict. The destination of the market is easier to predict. From, let's say today let's say Nifty is 23,000. अभी निफ्टी कभी 5,000 था, कभी 3,000 था, कभी 10,000 हुआ, फिर 15 हुआ, फिर 20 हुआ, फिर 25 हुआ. लेकिन हर जर्नी में बीच में नीचे भी आया. But generally the trend is upwards. Is a more certain assumption to make, right, than to know path कैसे होगा. And let's say from a starting point of 1,000 to a final end destination of let's say 50,000. मेरे lifetime में मान लो market, if I give 50 years to market or 30 years to market, assume ये 100 times ऊपर जाएगा. So 1000 का market 1 लाख होना चाहिए. तो ये start और end point mathematically पता है हमें, यहाँ पहुंचेगा, but इसके बीच में क्या path लेगा वो, there can be million paths. If you do a Monte Carlo simulation, क्या क्या paths हो सकता है, there can be million paths. Right. And neither you or I will know which path will it take. Right. I will tell you that path only after it reaches 1 lakh. Right. When my age is 85, 90 years old. So all I'm trying to say is that we keep waiting for either corrections or rises. But when we say that we are waiting, it means we are making a statement कि मुझे path पता है. और अगर आपको path पता होता तो NAV क्या है ये सवाल पूछना नहीं चाहिए. 10 रुपया सस्ता है या 20 सस्ता है या स्टॉक. So point is again illusion of wrong knowledge, right? And hence, in short, I will say that only at extreme points you can make certain assumptions of correction. So, for example, the way I think about investing corrections is not on the basis of the price of the market or the price of the mutual fund unit or the price of the share. I would rather replace this by the value of the market, the intrinsic value of the market or the portfolio. तो मैं ये एक assumption कर सकता हूँ कि अगर इंडिया का प्रॉफिट पूल पर शेयर 1,200 रुपया है, तो इसको 20 का पी मल्टीपल फेयर मल्टीपल है. आई एम जस्ट गिविंग अ क्रूड एग्जांपल, एंड हेंस 24,000 का लेवल थोड़ा फेयर लगता है. बट मैं अगर मान लो ये मार्केट 30 के मल्टीपल पे चला गया फॉर वॉट एवर रीजन, विच मीन्स सेम 1,200 के प्रॉफिट अर्निंग पर शेयर को 30 का मल्टीपल देके मान लो निफ्टी 36,000 पे आज ही चला जाता है, देन आई नो कि यहाँ से दिस इज अ अनसस्टेनेबल price of the market. Right. Market doesn't deserve the value of 30 times. So for a stock market which has 15% long-term profit growth, 15% return on equity and 12 to 13% long-term profit growth rate, the fair value of the market is 17 or 18 PE. Right. There are periods it stays above fair value like 20, 21, 22, which has been the case in the last 5 years. But it has remained there for 5 years. It has not come back to fair value. Right. Or there are periods it can remain below fair value. So the assumptions I can make is जब मार्केट फेयर वैल्यू के ऊपर है तब मैं अपना पैसा थोड़ा सेफ रख के हाइब्रिड फंड्स कर लेता हूँ. जब मार्केट अनफेयरली चीप है, 13 पी पे चला जाता है, तब मैं पोर्टफोलियो में रिस्क ऐड कर लूंगा. I feel this is a better way to think about predicting the journey of the market versus predicting ये 2,000 पॉइंट ऊपर नीचे कर जाएगा. तो जब भी आपको लगता है मार्केट सस्ता है कंपेयर टू इट्स फेयर वैल्यू, कीप इन्वेस्टिंग और स्टे इन्वेस्टेड. जब भी हमें लगता है कि अपने फेयर वैल्यू से बहुत ज्यादा महंगा हो गया है, उस समय पे नया पैसा आप थोड़ा स्लो लगा सकते हो या नया पैसा आप कंजर्वेटिव फंड में लगा सकते हो. So that's the way to think about the need to predict the path.
Right.
So you don't need to predict the path. You need to understand the value of the market. I think that reframing might help you take better investment decisions.
Right. So while we are on this topic, right, the methodology, lump sum or SIP.
Yeah.
It's safe to say combination होना चाहिए इन दोनों का. ऐसा नहीं कि सारा एक ही दिन, जैसे आपने बोला मेरे को आज लग रहा है कि आज ठीक है थोड़ा सस्ता है तो मैं पूरा लमसम आज ही डाल दूं. और is there like a right way, a framework to think about?
So I think the framework is आपका cash flow कैसे आ रहा है. See, 99% of your viewers and our investors earn cash flows every month. अगर हमारा cash flow monthly है तो SIP ही by default एक better option बन जाता है. So it is basically the reality of our lives that our earnings come in a monthly format. So that reality makes SIP a more natural choice. Right. Let's say if there's a large investor who's running a business and he's earning 30 crores of profits annually, and he has got money. It's not just a monthly cash flow, but lumpy cash flow. Then lump sum investment is relevant for such needs.
Right.
But if I come back to most people, because we earn on a monthly basis, SIP is a better way. The way I think about it is that the way I invest, over 30 years, I have been an SIP investor for 30 years. There is no single month where I have not done an SIP because मेरा पगार हर महीना आता है. At the same time, हर साल के end में, जैसे मार्च में या अप्रैल में मेरा परफॉर्मेंस पे आता है या मेरा बोनस आता है. द बोनस अमाउंट इज अ लंपी अमाउंट, इज अ लंप सम अमाउंट. अब जब बोनस आएगा तो इसको मैं लंप सम में इन्वेस्ट करूंगा, या मैं इसको अगर मुझे स्टैगर करना है तो आई विल डू अ सिस्टमैटिक ट्रांसफर प्लान. I may think that, okay, markets are still above fair value. I don't want to put everything in an equity fund.
Right.
Either I will put everything in my dynamic asset allocation or my multi-asset allocation fund. The fund, वो fund फिर सर फोड़ लेगा अपना, उसको कहाँ कितना stocks में, कितना gold में, कितना bond में रखना है. I will not second guess. So that's one way. So when I get lumpy money, I apply one framework. When I get lumpy money, if markets are expensive, I will invest either in a hybrid fund or I will do a systematic transfer plan, which is like an SIP for big money.
Okay.
Or if the markets are cheap, I will straight away go and take the risk that I want to take. So it should be a function of your cash flow cycle and the setup of the market and the risk of the market. महंगा market है या सस्ता market है? Valuation महंगा है तो hybrid करिए, सस्ता है तो lump sum in equity funds you should do.
Got it. Understood. I think that cleared a lot of things in my mind also. So I'll move on to the next myth. SIP is a safe and risk-free way to invest. अभी आपने भी बोला कि आप 30 साल से SIP कर रहे हैं ना. मेरे को ये डर है कि अपन ने it's a methodology, it's a way to invest, right?
It's a process. Yeah.
But don't you think sometimes I feel it's being a little too oversold if you're SIPing into the wrong fund or something, right? You might just go back a lot. Right? Because we are confusing systematic with safe. SIP करके वो मेरा financial plan है, तो वो थोड़ा मेरे को troublesome.
See, a fund is safe or an asset class is safe, not the method. So if you're doing an SIP in an equity fund, you have to confront the volatility of equity fund. If stock markets fall 50% at any point in time, even if you're doing an SIP, you will fall at 50%. But if you're doing an SIP in a debt fund, if an SIP in a debt fund will be safer because debt fund itself is a safe asset class. And another benefit of SIP only, so like the first statement, SIP does not mean safe because asset classes are safe or risky. The method does not change the nature of risk. The method can cushion the nature of risk or magnify the nature of risk.
Right.
Now SIP as a method also cushions returns. So markets, so like I said ना कि अगर आपका 50 साल का horizon है और 1000 का निफ्टी 1 लाख पे जाने वाला है. So if you are a lump sum investor, you will earn the highest return because you will earn 1 lakh minus 1000. The entire return is yours if you have done a lump sum and you had all the money.
Yeah.
So by technically, mathematically, lump sum makes the highest return. But then if you are buying at a level of 10,000, so let me give an example. 2008 में Sensex का जो peak था, it fell by 50%. It went up by 100% in the next year, which means it came back to the same level. And for the next 4 years, it remained at the same level. So 2008 starting value and 2014 end value for an equity fund or Nifty or Sensex was the same.
Right.
आपने 100 रुपया लगाया होता तो पहले 50 हो गया, फिर डबल होके 100 हुआ वापस, और फिर 4 साल कहीं नहीं गया, तो 100 का 100 ही मिला आपको 6 साल बाद. अगर डेट में रख दिया होता तो 100 की वैल्यू 140 रुपया हो जाती. But if you had done an SIP in this entire period of 5-6 years, because you averaged all the way low and you averaged all the way sideways, the return earned by the investor was roughly 7% per annum.
Right.
Versus zero. So the path can also determine the return. So if you have a path where early in your start of the SIP, if the NAVs are falling, it's great for an SIP investor. On the other hand, especially what's happened in the last 3-4 years, investors averaged upwards because invest kiya and markets kept on rising. So all my SIP purchases were on higher and higher NAV, and then the NAV falls.
Right.
So if you've already accumulated units and then the NAV falls, the same 5-year period. So you still are मान लो पहले केस में 100 से 50 जाके हम 100 पे आए, दूसरे केस में 100 से 150 जाके हम 100 पे आए. So in both cases the start and end are the same, but the paths are opposite.
Right.
The return outcome will be opposite. So hence to say anything with such precision and certainty that SIP है तो safe है is not correct. The path will determine, the setup will determine, the phase of the market, lot of these variables will determine. The only good thing that SIP does is जब बाजार गिरता है, market सस्ता होता है, left to ourselves, we will not invest. We will bring our super intelligence to say अब और गिरेगा, अब मुझे पता है war कब बंद होने वाला है, मुझे पता है कि war नहीं बंद होने वाला है. Trump has called me today morning and secretly told me कि मैं इसमें और चलने दूंगा. So people become too intelligent at such periods. But an SIP is not too intelligent. It is reasonably intelligent to say कि अगर सस्ता मिलता है तो खरीदो, और सस्ता मिलता है तो और खरीदो. तो SIP क्या करता है कि गिरते मार्केट में ज्यादा यूनिट्स खरीदता है. तो जब units and a falling market, which is a bear market for NAV, is a bull market for units. So an SIP allows you to participate in a bull market of units. So if you are a 10-year investor, आपने 5 साल के bear market में अगर units इकट्ठा कर लिया है, और अगले 5 साल में जब ये bear market पूरा हुआ और NAV जब ऊपर जाएगी, on a higher base of units, your NAV will rise.
Right.
And that is the beauty of SIP. So SIPs are beautiful, but equally volatile.
Right. I think that was really well articulated. Thank you so much for helping us with that myth. I'll move on to the next one. Small cap funds are too risky. I'm better off with large cap. Right. I know you're thinking I'm just giving you little incomplete statements, but there's just general beliefs that I come across. These are incomplete in that sense. I'll just give a little context. This one is mostly misunderstood in my opinion because of the word risk, right? People are not able to fathom that in the entire context of investing. A large cap that quietly, if it underperforms quietly, right? It's equally bad, right? It's not like large cap le liya to safe hu main.
Of course. So look at it this way. Look at so many large cap stocks. Actually, in the last 3-4 years, in the last 5-7 years, actually the largest 10 stocks of India, the top 4 banks, the top 2 tech companies, the top 2 consumer companies, they have fallen a lot more than small and mid caps. But that does not make small caps safe, by the way. So people can take the wrong lesson when I make this statement. So in every cycle, risk is different. In some cycles, small caps do well. In some cycles, large caps do well. In fact, in the last 1 year, last 2 years, the largest pharma stock of the world, Novo Nordisk, is down 60%. It is the largest market cap. It's a mega cap. It is in the top 10 market cap of the whole world. And that has fallen by 60%. Now, can we say large caps are safe? No. It's a pharma stock. People say that pharma company defensive hoti hai, healthcare is defensive. Pharma stock has fallen by 60%. Nike का stock roughly 60% down है पिछले 2 साल में. Nike is a consumer stock. It's a brand. There were periods when Microsoft and Amazon, they were down 50 to 70%. They were mega caps of the world. So basically, stocks are risky. Wo large ho, mid ho, small ho. Bad stocks are more risky, which means stocks which do not have reason to exist or have bad business models or are companies which are run poorly. And any stock bought at higher than fair value is also risky.
Yeah.
So a great consumer company which has 60-70% return on capital, which has amazing free cash flow, which has the most iconic leaders of the world running it. If you overpay for it, if you pay 50, 70, 80 P multiple, that stock can fall by 60-70%.
Right.
Apple stock has fallen 70%. Amazon has fallen. In India, for almost 15 years, the best tech stocks of the country fell 50-60% and remained sideways for almost 7-8 years.
Right.
कोक का स्टॉक 20-20 साल जीरो रिटर्न दिया है, जो बफेट का सबसे बड़ा होल्डिंग है. तो I would just add to what you said. All stocks are risky, and more so if they are poor quality, and more so if they are bought at higher valuations or unfair valuations.
Got it. So I'll just ask you this follow-up thing on this, right? If there's a 32-year-old investor who has a 20-year investment horizon, right? Currently. Versus someone who is approaching retirement and has a relatively smaller investment period, right? Is it safe to say that the person approaching retirement should look at more large cap stocks? Is it safer to say that, or is it just like I'm trying to package it to sell something, right? I would look at it as the latter, but how do you see this?
अगर आप 2013 में शुरू करते हो इन्वेस्ट करना, let's say it's my retired father, and he got his retirement money in 2013, and he lives with me. So I know that he doesn't have any large expense, but the corpus is large, and I know that effectively his money is going to be long term. It will pass on to the next generation. Then the time horizon is long term. Number one. Number two. So even though he is retired and new income is stopped, but the time horizon is long term. Right. And the market conditions are such where small cap stocks have come down to 11 or 12 P multiple, and great small cap businesses which have a 20% return on capital, which can grow profits between 10 to 15% in a normal business cycle. If I get a setup like that, I don't mind investing his money in a small cap fund also.
Right.
On the other hand, when it was in hindsight, January 2008, when even if it is a 32-year-old professional with a 20-year time horizon, if market P multiples were at 26, 27 times, 50% of the market was in infrastructure stocks or capital goods stocks where the governance quality was poor. And on top of it, they were valued at 40, 50 P multiple. And they were valued at 40, 50 times of earnings, where the earning itself was on a high cycle, boosted by the leverage taken by corporate India. So everything in the setup was screaming risk. For such an investor, whether he is my retired father or it was me at the age of 25 also, investing in a large cap fund or a small cap fund, both were wrong. Right. Both would have given inferior outcomes. In fact, since that day till today, 2008 to 2026, 18 years have passed. The funds which were popular then, if you had invested in those funds, since that day till today, the returns are less than a fixed deposit. So even though such a long time, so if you invest at wrong prices in wrong business, whatever is your profile as a consumer, whether you are a retiree or a professional starting your career, it is a wrong thing to invest. So investing should not be only linked to your persona and life goals and life stage. It should be married with where are we in the cycle, which asset class is hot, which asset class is safe. So that extra dimension becomes very important. Any one in isolation is incomplete and will give you faulty inferences.
Right. I think that's a fair way to put it, and very interesting. But
at large, you can say that again, I would say that 95% people who are retired or retiring will not have the luxury of very long-term cash flows. They may not have the luxury of passing on their money to the next generation because a lot of people in India, live hand to mouth or do not have very high savings rate. Right. As they retire, there are other costs which go up. They may not necessarily live with their next generation. They don't have the next generation doesn't have the benefit of living with their parents. So a lot of these, when you look at these dimensions, ideally a portfolio of a retiree should be more conservative. Is a very good first principle to keep in mind.
Got it. All right, I think this one is something would interest you. I'll talk about this. The next myth. when the markets fall sharply, the smart move is to pause your SIP. We've covered it briefly, but I want to understand, suppose the Nifty, March 2020, Nifty fell 38% in like 5 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And what did a large number of investors do? They essentially went ahead and stopped their SIPs, right? And another data point that I read is like 75% of all investors, they pause their SIPs within the first year. Right? It's like, again, those gym plans and, you have it, it's good for you, but you yet go ahead and make the wrong decision.
Like I told you, what does an SIP do? Every month it goes away from my bank account without calling me or telling me, quietly goes and buys units. Now, if I started an SIP when market was at a price of 100 rupees, and I'm putting 1,000 rupees every month, I would have got 10 units. Now, if that 100 rupee price or the NAV has dropped to 70 rupees, so 1,000 divided by 70, instead of buying 10 units,
it'll get more than 13.
I'll get more units. I'll get 13 to 14 units. So if markets are down 20%, actually I get 25% higher units. So a better time or the best time to start or run or increase your SIPs is when you feel like stopping or pausing your SIPs. An investor who will pause his SIPs on market correction should not be in equity markets at all. He does not deserve to earn the returns of equity market. In fact, actually such investors are great for those who earn better long-term returns, because overall market returns are, let's say 12%. Many people earn less than 12. So that few people can earn more than 12. So this is one of the first or the worst misbehavior that investors have, that when markets fall, they get out or they stop their SIPs. Just when the time for SIP has started to show its magic is when you're going and running away. And in a more realistic, anecdotal way, Buffett's teacher, Ben Graham, has, written this in one of the chapters of The Intelligent Investor, and he said this in context to the American consumer, that if you are a consumer of hamburgers, which that population is, would you want potato prices to rise or fall? And every American would say, I would be happy if prices fall. Whereas if you apply the same yardstick in investing, if you are a purchaser of units every month, and that is the responsibility of an SIP investor, right? We are purchaser of units every month. Right. If you are going to be a consumer of units every month, would you like your unit prices, which is the NAV, to rise or fall? If you reframe the question like this, you will celebrate falling prices. Right. When I read this in 2008, till that time, I was always a happy investor. When NAVs were rising, I would put more and more money. After I read this was my first big turning point. And that made me, welcome corrections. I would be most excited when there is a correction because I'm buying more units. It is a great shopping experience for me. I feel very dejected when markets rise too sharply, because till the time I'm earning a salary, let's say for the next 10 years, which means the next 120 months, if I'm going to have cash flows, after all my expenses, I'm going to have free cash flows. I want markets to be lower so I can keep acquiring more units. Right. But if they rise sharply, the acquisition of my units will slow down. Right. So I think the wise investor knows that he should take advantage of falling NAVs. The naive investor gets carried away with the fear. And the other side of the naive investor gets excited when NAVs rise too sharply or too fast. Got it.
Now that you shared the hamburger, I didn't catch the name of the book again, please.
The Intelligent Investor by Ben Graham.
Yes. Okay, got it. All right, I'll move on to the next myth.
Sure.
Thematic funds are a smart way to bet on India's long-term growth story. Right. This is, I think, in context to, infrastructure in 2007 was hot. Defense was hot in 23, 24. A new theme comes, captures attention for like a period of time, and then it subsides. What's your take on this? Is this,
thematic funds are bad if you buy them at a high. Sorry, I interrupted. Please complete it.
I was just saying that, people end up getting disappointed, and it kind of, the theme boils down to all other thinking that mutual funds are bad or stocks are bad because you wouldn't.
So I think, again, like I said, I go back to everything that I spoke in the last 30 minutes that if you buy any fund away from its fair value, higher than its fair value, higher than what it deserves to be bought at, you will pay a price for it by losing your capital.
Right.
Whether it is defense funds in recent times or so many thematic funds under PLI plus one, manufacturing in India, so many funds which came up have underperformed. In 2007-8, it was the infrastructure fund. In 2000, it was the technology fund. In 2019-20, it was the consumer funds and the high quality themes. In 20 to 23, it was the momentum factor themes. Anything which runs away from its median returns and fair value and becomes overpriced is a bubble. If you invest in a bubble, most likely you'll earn inferior returns.
Right.
And whether it is a theme or an asset class, gold is an asset class. It's not a theme. If you buy it when it's overpriced, you'll lose capital.
Yeah.
I think somewhere, as much as manufacturers and advisors and people like you and me have to be responsible, investors also have to be responsible to not chase greed.
Right.
When we chase fast greed, we make our portfolios risky at the wrong time, and then in future we lose returns.
Yeah.
So at the same time, the best returns I have made in my portfolio, see, I've lost higher returns in thematic funds when I was naive. And when I was less naive and slightly, learned this principle of mean reversion or, buying themes in low cycle. When I bought themes in low cycle, I've made the highest return. Our gold mining fund was a very, very bad, highly volatile fund. 20-year returns were zero. In 2017 to 20, in that 3-year period when I was investing in that, its last 5-year returns were 30% negative, whereas equity markets were 20% positive. So there was a huge gap between that theme and traditional equity funds. But there was a thesis that, gold is getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So gold mining stocks are also getting more cheaper and more attractive. And I wanted to build around 5% of my portfolio in that. So I invested in a thematic idea, but all through in its low cycle. And then when the traditional stock market faltered, this theme took off by delivering 350% return.
Right.
It's up 350% in the last 3 years. Now that has really helped me make my portfolio far more resilient. Now today, everybody wants to invest in that fund. And we have stopped taking money in that fund.
Right.
Today, I'm actually reducing my exposure from that theme because it has run its course. It has delivered more returns than what it should deserve. So a traditional way of thinking would have been to chase the theme today. Right. But a better time is to chase the theme when it is in low cycle. After COVID, everyone chased the theme of tech stocks. In India, tech stocks were, they were up three to four times in a matter of 2 years.
Right.
Stocks with 7-8% profit growth rate went to 50 times P multiple. But under the guard that, the whole world is becoming digitized and there will be no business where technology can't play a role. All those things are true. But if you overpay, in the last 3 years, tech stocks are down 25%.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to play tech as a theme, a wrong time was then. Maybe the starting point is now.
Yeah.
So thematic funds add a lot of value if you understand the cycles of those themes. And if you do not understand, don't even touch them.
Yeah. I think that the last line was very important and it resonated with me. It's better not to do it if you don't understand it. It's probably better that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'll talk about the last myth. This is my most favorite one and one that I've been, itching to ask. The fund manager is the most important factor when I'm choosing a fund. Is this, it's that I need to follow a star fund manager. It's like the most important thing.
See, generally, I would say that the fund manager is a very, very important part because he's the one who broadly determines the framework, the process, the ideology, and whether he will stick to it or not. External forces like the CEO or the organization's risk framework and all can play a certain role. But the real execution, the stock selection, the risk management, the understanding of valuation, business cycles is where the role of the talent or the skill comes in place. So they are very, very important in our outcome. So how do you judge a fund manager is very important. So rather than, also you should know what is the definition of a star fund manager. A star fund manager is actually, according to me, the one who doesn't want to be a star, who doesn't want to be glamorized, who is understated, who doesn't want to be on television or even in podcasts and over communicating. A star fund manager is happy reading annual reports, reading economics, understanding valuation, playing with technology tools today to improvise his investment process, risk management. He is not seen. A designer of a car is not standing in a showroom giving a podcast that meri gaadi kyun achhi hai. He's non-stop doing R&D. So real stars are actually unknown,
Right.
or less publicly known. A star fund manager, according to me, is the one who worries a lot about risk, who does not sell products to you, who does not glorify investing at all points in time, who is not super bullish always, who is not, come what may, only giving stories to, create animal spirits in you and wanting to make you invest. A great fund manager to me is the one who curbs your instincts to make mistakes. He will tell you, ab thoda slow ho jao. He will tell you, seed weight stand go. He will say, portfolio mein breaks laga do. He will say, start booking some profits. To my mind, my hero fund manager is the one who will do all these things. He's the one who will write once in a year to his unit holders, saying कि ये मेरी गलतियां थी, मैं इनसे ये सीखा. Who will not write about just the India story and Viksit Bharat and what is the Prime Minister of India doing in terms of, and Prime Minister is doing a great job in building the country. But a fund manager doesn't need to take those laurels in his commentary. He has to say what is he doing in his portfolio.
Right.
How is he managing the risk? How is he understanding the risk? So you should be able to first write down what are the traits of a star fund manager and how will you search for one. It's not easy again. And that is where the role of an advisor becomes very important. Now, unfortunately, most advisors also are human beings and they also have the same, biases around and many fund managers, when they are actually in the phase of building up risk in the portfolio, that is when they become stars because the NAVs shoot up that time.
Right.
So, and then in the next cycle, the NAVs turn. So I've seen in my 30 years, there are phases when someone becomes a star and then collapses. Again, someone else becomes a star. There are very few who have stuck to an ideology credibly, consistently, prudently, and rationally. And till you cannot identify one, either find a good advisor who can guide you, or find a good technique where through data you can understand the qualities of a star fund manager. It will reflect in data. It will show that his NAVs do not fall in sharp periods. His NAVs, his portfolio does not have the hot stocks of a cycle. So whenever I interview fund managers and who have long vintage, one way for me to judge their acumen, wisdom, risk management is to open the portfolio of December 2007, which was the market bubble. And if that portfolio was loaded with infrastructure stocks, then I know that it's playing along with the market. But if that portfolio had a lot of unpopular stocks of that time, which is great consumer companies, great pharma companies, great tech companies, then you know that he's an independent thinker. He can think a bit differently and he can, understand turning points. I think it's a very deep, nuanced way to think about it. Not easy to understand with just one or two cycles or, few years of track record. Until you can't find a great fund manager, then choose an index fund. Simple Nifty 50 will do the job for you.
Right. I really like the thought of how you evaluate one. We're looking at the 2007 one, but in their defense, they were also young then. Is it okay?
No. The right guys. See, skill has got nothing to do with tenure alone. The right fund managers, there were enough guys who let's say today they are 55, they were 35 that time. Or someone in the bubble of 2000 did not have, crazily valued tech stocks in the portfolio. There are a couple of them who were not loaded with tech stocks in 2000. You can look back 25 years and there were one or two managers who did not make that mistake because they knew the skill of investing was that buying good companies is 50% of the rule, not overpaying for their valuations is the other 50% of the rule. And if they followed both the disciplines well, cycle after cycle, they have done well.
Got it. Very interesting. I really loved, talking about this aspect. So yeah, I think we've, debunked a lot of myths. I can go on and on with them, but I'd love to, build back a little conviction so that the listeners could have some actionable takeaway as well. almost every conversation starts with, which fund do I need to invest in, right? Which fund should I pick? This, I think, is a wrong question generally. What would you think should be the first question that someone thinks about when they first start investing?
The first thing इसके मेरे हाथ में पैसा कितना है और कितने समय के लिए है और मेरा रिस्क प्रोफाइल क्या है और मैं कितना फ्लक्चुएशन झेल सकता हूँ. So each answer to each of these will first determine कौन से asset class में आपको इन्वेस्ट करना है. मेरे पास पैसा है सिर्फ 1 साल का, so I will only choose arbitrage funds. I will not even bother equity में क्या हो रहा है. I have money for 3 years. I will look at history and say that, or let's say on your app, and you're trying to do a very credible job by showing rolling returns, volatility, drawdowns. I will say that, okay, which funds in 3 years, what are the worst case returns of each product category? And if it shows that equity funds on a 3-year basis have given 20% negative return or 15% negative, can I digest that? No, because my goal is 3 years away. And what if in the 3rd year bad luck strikes and I have to encounter that 15% negative return? And hence, even for 3 years, equity funds are not right for me. Maybe very conservative equity strategies like hybrid funds, like equity savings fund could be a better choice for me. Right. Or maybe 70% I'll keep in arbitrage or bonds and 30% I'll keep in conservative equity funds. Yep. So that's how you start. You start by asking what is the tenor of my money, what is the appetite of risk I have, and then the third question, once you have clarity, is the third question then is what is the risk of the market? एक है मेरा खुद का risk profile क्या है और दूसरा market का risk क्या है. मेरा risk profile भले aggressive हो, but market भी अगर aggressively risky है, then the choice of my fund could be a conservative hybrid fund.
Right.
Or if let's say my risk profile is moderate, my time horizon is also moderate, but the entire risk of the market has got washed out because of a 50-60% correction. And there's pessimism all around and valuations have come down. And I do not have a 10-year horizon, I have only a 5-year horizon. And I am a moderate risk investor. But the market has become so safe that it may still be a good time to invest in equity. So unfortunately, I don't have simple answers to your simple questions. Because investing, while it is simple, is not so easy that I can put everything in 1 or 2 lines. So knowing these dimensions is very important. We cherry pick only one of them. Whatever is suitable at a point in time, we cherry pick one of them. But you have to take a combination of all these variables: your risk profile, market risk profile, your time horizon, the style of that fund. There are, like, for example, 5 years back, it was taught that high quality funds are safe. Funds with high ROEs are safe. But they had become so expensive on valuations that in the next 5 years, they've actually delivered sharp 25-30% capital erosion. So even with high quality balance sheets and cash flows, they lost money for an investor. So quality stocks can also lose capital. Would any textbook have taught you? No. So when you see a lot of market cycles, so I think the first question I ask myself is, मुझे जहाँ भी पैसा लगाना है, इसका मेरे defined time horizon में worst case return क्या हुआ था? So if let's say the data says that the worst case return for this asset class was 20% negative, then I will say that जब वो 20% negative हुआ था, उसका starting condition क्या था? What was the starting condition which eventually led to a 20% drawdown? And is the current starting condition similar? If both are similar, I will avoid that asset class. And if both are not similar, I will then evaluate accordingly.
Yeah. I think thank you for distilling it so practically, and I understand it is not a straightforward answer, and but this gives at least the basic points that you need to think about, right? That's really helpful. And I think I asked all the questions I wanted to. Before I probably let you go, just last 2 minutes, I'll just go through the rapid fire round. Okay, so you please feel free to answer in a word or a sentence. Okay, I'll ask you a question.
Sure. Okay.
This is very generic, but I'll ask you this. The best time to invest was 10 years ago. The next best time is?
When you have money.
Okay. Flexi cap or multi-asset? If you could only hold one for the next 20 years, which one would you?
For the average common investor, I would say multi-asset. For someone who understands market volatility and cycles, I would say flexi cap.
Got it. One financial metric every investor must track apart from returns.
how much do these asset classes fall? How much can I lose if I get unlucky and if that asset class falls? So in the past history, what has been a worst case annual loss? So like, our small cap fund in its worst period had fallen by 67%.
Right.
So before investing in a small cap fund, if that memory is there in my mind, I can think of risk management more appropriately.
Biggest silent wealth destroyer in India, inflation or investor behavior?
Both.
Yeah. One book every investor must read.
I think simple decision-making framework के point of view से, it's The Art of Thinking Clearly by Rolf Tovelli. That's a good book. Then, if you want to learn a little bit more nuanced, advanced investing, particularly for Indian markets across asset classes, there's a book called Booms, Busts and Cycles, written by Manish Tangi. And then you want to read a little bit of, investing principles. Then a lot of things written by Warren Buffett or his letters, they are very useful. I learned about the role of market cycles when I read Howard Marks' The Most Important Thing. And one of the most important learning for me was, if the stock price of a good company is falling, most people will say market is risky. But actually, when the stock price is falling, the risk is also falling. And that was a very important dimension. So markets are risky not when they fall, because the fall has removed the risk. They are risky when they rise irrationally. And we have comfort of rising markets, unfortunately. We take a false comfort in rising market. Actually, rising markets, too sharply rising markets are more risky than too sharply falling markets.
Right.
So I think these 4 or 5 books collectively can shape you into better investment method and decision making.
Got it. Thank you so much for sharing that. And this is exactly the kind of conversation that I was hoping to have. Very clear, very candid. And for anyone listening who's ever felt that, who's serious about investing, I'd urge you to, come back to this and just think over the principles that we spoke about. Thank you so much for sharing this with us today. It was great to have you with us.
Thank you, and all the best for your endeavor to build a very honest practice of advice for investors. And I hope they are able to compound well, and you are also able to build your practice into a very successful fiduciary role. So all the best to you, and thanks for having me.
As it turns out, the market is not our enemy. It's our beliefs about the market that are. If you heard the conversation today, I'd want you to take this back with you. An investor with 12% stable returns will almost always outlast and outperform someone who's chasing 20% returns on shaky grounds. Behavior is the edge. Luckily, that edge is in your control. That's it for today's episode of Money Without Myths. If this episode made you rethink even one thing about your belief in investing, I'd want you to share it with someone else who may benefit from it. Thank you. Until next time.